She fired a single dad and celebrated. Seconds later, the CEO asked, "Where is he?" The cardboard box slipped from Daniel Carter's trembling hands and hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. A framed photograph of his little daughter, Emma, fell from the box and cracked across the glass. Around him, people laughed, whispered, and pretended not to stare as Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the company lobby, holding back tears. Just minutes earlier, his manager, Victoria Hale, had fired him in front of his co-workers, calling him a burden the company could no longer afford. She had even raised a champagne glass afterward, celebrating what she called a fresh start. But nobody in that room knew that Daniel's firing was about to reach the ears of the one person whose decision mattered most, the company's CEO. And when the CEO arrived seconds later, his first question stopped the laughter cold: "Where is he?" Before we continue, if you believe everyone deserves kindness, dignity, and a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness. Your support helps us bring more stories of compassion, courage, and unexpected second chances. Daniel had worked at Westbridge Financial for 7 years. He was never the loudest employee, never the one who stayed late just to be noticed, and never the person who fought for promotions. He simply did his job, went home, and tried to be the best father he could be to 6-year-old Emma. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving Daniel to raise their daughter alone. Every morning, he packed Emma's lunch, tied her tiny shoes, and walked her to school before catching 2 buses to reach the office. His life was exhausting, but he never complained. He knew Emma was watching him, and he wanted her to grow up believing that difficult circumstances were not an excuse to become a bitter person. But after Victoria became his manager, everything changed. She disliked Daniel because he occasionally needed to leave exactly on time to collect Emma from school. She never cared that he completed his assignments, often worked from home after Emma went to bed, and had never missed an important deadline. To Victoria, a father with responsibilities was an inconvenience. One Friday afternoon, she called him into her office and accused him of being uncommitted. Daniel tried to explain that he had been working nights to compensate for the hours he lost in the afternoon, but she had already made her decision. She placed a termination letter on the desk and told him that his services were no longer required. Daniel walked back to his desk with his heart pounding. He had only enough savings to survive a few weeks. Emma needed new school shoes. The rent was due in 10 days. There were medical bills still sitting unopened on his kitchen table. He looked at the little photograph of Emma beside his computer and quietly whispered that everything would be okay, even though he had no idea whether it would be. Victoria, meanwhile, had invited several senior employees to the lobby for drinks. She wanted everyone to see that Daniel was gone. When she noticed him carrying his belongings toward the exit, she smiled and raised her glass. Someone congratulated her for cleaning house, and the small group laughed. Daniel lowered his eyes and kept walking. He refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Then the elevator doors opened. The entire lobby went silent. Standing inside was Margaret Sterling, the company's CEO and majority shareholder, a woman known for being demanding but fair. She had returned unexpectedly from an overseas business trip and had come directly from the airport. Her eyes immediately landed on the broken photograph lying beside Daniel's box. Then she looked at the champagne glasses in Victoria's hands. Something about the scene made her expression change. Margaret stepped forward and asked where Daniel was. Victoria nervously explained that she had just terminated him because he was supposedly underperforming. Margaret stared at her for several seconds before asking how long Daniel had worked for the company. Victoria said 7 years. Margaret's face tightened. She asked how many major accounts Daniel had saved during those 7 years. No one answered. She then asked who had completed the emergency financial analysis that prevented the company from losing millions the previous winter. Victoria slowly admitted that Daniel had. Margaret turned toward the doors, but Daniel was already gone. She immediately instructed security to find him and asked for his personal number. When Daniel answered, he was sitting at a bus stop, staring at the cracked photograph in his hands. Margaret told him to come back. Daniel refused at first, saying he had already been fired. Margaret replied that she knew, and that was exactly why she wanted him back. When Daniel returned to the office, Margaret did something nobody expected. She apologized. Not because she had personally fired him, but because she admitted that a company could not call itself successful while allowing hardworking people to be humiliated for having families. She told Daniel that his termination was cancelled, Victoria was being removed from management pending an investigation, and Daniel would be offered a promotion into a new position overseeing employee support and workplace fairness. Daniel stood there speechless. He had prepared himself to lose his job, his home, and perhaps his confidence. Instead, someone had finally looked beyond his circumstances and recognized his worth. Months later, Daniel was no longer rushing nervously through the office doors each morning. He still packed Emma's lunch. He still walked her to school whenever he could. But now he worked for a company that understood that employees were human beings before they were numbers on a spreadsheet. And Margaret kept one simple sentence framed in her office, a sentence Daniel had once told her when she asked why he never complained about his struggles: "I don't need anyone to make my life easy. I just need someone to remember that I'm trying." One evening, Margaret saw Daniel leaving the building with Emma beside him. Emma was holding her father's hand and proudly carrying a drawing she had made for him. Margaret smiled as Daniel looked back and thanked her with a quiet nod. She realized that sometimes leadership was not about knowing when to fire someone. Sometimes it was about knowing when to stop, listen, and ask one simple question: where is he? If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness for more stories that remind us that one compassionate decision can change an entire life. And before you go, comment, "Second chances matter," if you believe nobody should be judged simply because they are struggling, and that sometimes, all a person needs is for someone to see their worth before it is too late. Because Daniel didn't need pity. He needed someone to believe in him. And sometimes, that one act of kindness is enough to change everything.